Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for coming to the most recent edition of the Texas Women's Foundation Virtual Viewpoints. And today we're going to be talking about housing. Now, we've been spending the last several months on our virtual viewpoints, really taking deeper dives into what we see as the four key building blocks of economic security for women and girls. So we did childcare, we did education, and today we're going to be talking about housing. Now, we've actually been looking at these issues from a research standpoint since 2014, and we see housing as a key building block and really as an anchor for financial security for families. However, it is also for most families the largest single monthly expense. And while that can anchor a family into a community and into a school, for too many women, it is dragging them underwater. High rates of housing burden and lack of true choice on where to live are preventing them and their children from flourishing. Now, before COVID-19, 1.3 million Texas homeowners and 1.7 million Texas renters were housing cost burdened. And what that means is that they were spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing. Now, families with very low incomes may be eligible for housing assistance, like housing choice vouchers. But in Texas, 83% of choice vouchers are indeed women. And since Texas allows landlords to discriminate against families using vouchers, even many of the families who obtain one are unable to use them, particularly if they desire to move into lower poverty neighborhoods. Put threats of eviction on top of that, something that we're all learning a lot more about now that it's on the front page of the news. And the saying, home sweet home, kind of becomes a sick joke for many in our state. So thank you for joining us today as we discuss this incredibly important issue, and also to learn more about the Texas Women's Foundation's newest strategy fund, the Housing Stability Fund. Now, while the foundation has long funded transitional and emergency housing, particularly in the area of domestic violence, we really began this deeper dive into housing about 18 months ago, and I have learned so much since this journey began. And today, you're going to get to hear from some of the experts and providers in the community that have really helped me and the Texas Women's Foundation as we moved along this path. But before I go any further, first of all, I want to share the stage for just a few moments with Michelle Reed from Capital One. Capital One has been our longtime sponsor of Virtual Viewpoints back when we were doing this actually in real life and it wasn't virtual. And we're really grateful for the help you are giving us today to make this series possible. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dina. Welcome. Capital One is proud to partner with Texas Women's Foundation for today's conversation. I continue to be inspired by this group's incredible work that is supporting women and girls across DFW and throughout the state. Today's topic of housing stabilization is such a critical issue for families throughout our region and one that is important to our work and commitment to the community. Socioeconomic mobility is one of the most pervasive and long-standing issues in our society. We believe disparity in housing, education, and employment, among other key factors, create inequities in a person's financial health and overall well-being. Housing and shelter are key to well-being. Without stable housing, it can be more difficult to thrive, but affordable housing continues to be one of the biggest societal challenges. Record high cost of living and limited supply of low-cost rentals are threatening where people live and work. In support of our mission to change banking for good, we launched the Capital One Impact Initiative to advance socioeconomic mobility by advocating for an inclusive society, building thriving communities, and creating financial tools that enrich lives. Affordable housing is central to building equitable, healthy, and stable communities. As more and more households become cost-burdened or on the verge of housing instability, we think about how we can marshal Capital One's collective ingenuity and resources to create more affordable housing to support housing stabilization. We provide capital to finance affordable rental housing developments that meet the needs of a diverse range of households and communities in partnership with nonprofit organizations, for-profit real estate developers, and government. As the #1 community development lender nationally for the past 3 years, Capital One has provided nearly $29 billion in CD loans since 2016. As part of that activity, Capital One has provided $13 billion in construction financing since 2007 for over 140,000 affordable housing units and creating over 158,000 jobs. We also provide targeted support services that offer stability, affordability, and well-being to meet residents' needs. Needs vary depending on household. That's why we have specialized service-enriched communities that focus on veterans, intergenerational households, those experiencing homelessness, and households that have varying capability and levels of mental wellness. Since 2011, Capital One has provided more than $1.3 billion in affordable housing support across the state of Texas. Capital One has supported a Dallas-based consortium of CDCs and similar organizations engaging in affordable housing in South Dallas, including Builders of Hope CDC, Citywide CDC, East Dallas Community Organization, South Dallas Fair Park, and South Fair CDC. Our focus has been on stabilizing the area's real estate market by developing quality, affordable homes and preparing local residents for home ownership. Since its inception, the collaborative has developed 155 units of affordable housing, helped 108 low-income clients purchase homes, and provided counseling and education to nearly 12,000 individuals. Communities play such an important role in every aspect of our lives. That is why it is more critical than ever for private sectors, government, and the philanthropic sector to come together to build communities that thrive. I'm so excited for us to be elevating this critical topic in today's conversation, so together we can create a more equitable future for all Texans. So now I would like to invite back Dina to kick off the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We are so happy to get to partner with Capital One, as well as to have you all in partners around affordable housing for North Texas, as well as for the entire state. And so now, without further ado, the lead focus for today's meeting is our 3 new grantees to the Texas Women's Foundation. These are all organizations that we have just started working with over the last few months. And I'm going to introduce them each one by one, give them some time to introduce you to their programs before we move on into some questions. We are going to have time for questions at the end, so please make sure you use that Q&A tab there at the bottom. And that way we'll be able to come around to what you care about after we're finished with our remarks. So first of all, Mark Porter. Mark has been the executive director at Harmony CDC since 2013, and he also serves as the associate pastor at Concord Church in Dallas, where he is responsible for local and global mission outreach. Also, since Texas Women's Foundation has been doing Viewpoints for maybe 2.5 years now, also, I'm going to say Mark is our very, very first male panelist. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Dana. We're excited to be a part of this collaborative, and thank you for this opportunity to be on this exciting webinar on this morning. So as Dana, you mentioned that I serve as the executive director of Harmony CDC. We're located in the southern sector of Dallas in the Redbird community. Just a little bit about Redbird. It's a tale of 2 communities. We're excited about the growth and development that is happening in the Redbird community. However, there's still a great need with our families that are dealing with food, housing, job, and emotional insecurity. There are still pockets of poverty and food deserts in Redbird and our neighboring communities. And then also there's a concentration of apartment complexes and motels and families that we serve. On this year, Harmony celebrates 20 years of existence as we serve our community. Harmony also serves families throughout the southern sector of Dallas and also in the southern cities of Dallas County. Our mission is to strengthen families and revitalize neighborhoods. And so we do that through our food pantry, our counseling center, financial assistance and education, our housing stability program and services, our counseling services where we provide mental health and wellness, workforce development and career development, and our other supportive and wraparound services. We're also excited that we partner with Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, who is an on-site partner that work hand in hand with us. In 2020, we assisted over 120 families with free legal services and eviction prevention services with legal aid. Also, I'm excited to share that we assisted over 400 families with rental and eviction services and helping them to stabilize in this pandemic and economic downturn. We also offered over 1,600 counseling sessions to help families that are impacted by this emotional trauma of this economic downturn and pandemic. And also 76% of our clients are women, and also particularly women of color. But we're excited to be a part of this partnership with Texas Women's Foundation as we continue to help those families that are impacted by housing insecurity. So thank you, Dina, for being allowing me to be a part of this great conversation.
Thank you, Mark. And I think what you really are going to be able to talk even more about is how there's a lot more to housing stability than just a rent or a mortgage payment. It's all those wraparound services that are needed as well. So now we're going to move on to Demetria McCain. Demetria has been president of the Inclusive Communities Project since 2005. She has a law degree from Howard University and is a longtime fair housing advocate. I will also say that I checked your dates at Howard and you were not there at the same time as our brand new Vice President, Kamala Harris. But welcome, Demetria, and we look forward to hearing about ICP.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that shout out to Howard University. I was there for law school, so it was a little later on. First of all, let me just say, Dina, I am super excited that you all decided to really kind of peel the onion, you might say, and get into the weeds of housing, because so many people don't. And as complicated as some may say that it is really the lifeblood of all of us, right? All of us, at least on this call, I would say, have a roof over our heads. And so just to give you a little bit of information about the Inclusive Communities Project. So we are a regional organization. We are physically based in Dallas, but our work is regional, just like our housing market in Dallas is regional. So we have really a three-part type of mission, which is the creation and maintenance of racially and economically inclusive communities throughout our region. We also want to expand affordable fair housing opportunities for low-income families. And really key here, too, is the redress of the policies and practices that really perpetuate discrimination and segregation. Because as we all know, we know the history of this country, which is not one that to be proud of, so to say, as it relates to housing and how it's treated some people in the housing market. And we do that with kind of a neighborhood equity and options frame, right? And so our neighborhood may know us in helping residents how to navigate local systems, residents really in high poverty areas that have really kind of have a history of being redlined, you might say. Some of our work in the 10th Street district, that historic district there, with folks who are trying to preserve where they're living and the history there. But really what we've been doing for 15 years is our counseling of Section 8 housing choice voucher holders. These are low-income families, and the families who have vouchers, they're about 14,000 at the Dallas Housing Authority, but a subset of those come to us because they're tired of being forced to live and steered to live in high poverty, segregated, historically redlined neighborhoods. They want to move out to lower poverty areas where they think that their children could better thrive. They have more access to opportunity, they're closer to job markets and things of that nature. And so that's really been the basis of a lot of our work over these last 15 years. But we use several tools to get our mission accomplished. So we have the direct services through the housing counseling and our connection to to low-income renters, but we also try to deal with the barriers that our housing counselors face when they're trying to help those renters, because it's not easy, as was stated earlier. If you have a voucher, it's hard to find housing in particularly a low poverty, non-segregated area. And so we use both research, we use policy advocacy, we use technical assistance that we provide those who are interested in these issues, relationships with folks and developers who want to build low-income housing in some of our lower poverty, non-segregated areas. And when it's necessary, we do use litigation to try to fight back some of the policies and practices that really go against the meaning and the spirit and the letter of fair housing. So that's our work. We are here in the DFW area, and I will turn it back over to you, Dina. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Demetria. And our last panelist for today is Erin Thornbert, who is the Director of Housing Services at the Center for Transforming Lives in Fort Worth. Now, the Center for Transforming Lives provides many, many services, and housing is just one small part of it. So in her daily life, Erin works with families both from an emergency shelter standpoint as well as longer term housing. And we have learned that on occasion, she also has to fill in at the Center for Transforming Lives emergency shelter for overnight duties. So we're always very excited to see Erin this early in the morning. So thank you so much for being with us, and let us know a little bit about the housing program over there in in Fort Worth.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Dina. Again, my name is Erin Thornbert. I'm the Director of Housing Services at the Center for Transforming Lives, and we're located in downtown Fort Worth. I oversee the rapid rehousing program, emergency shelter, and transitional housing, both on-site and in the community. Our mission is to lift women with children from poverty to possibility through housing, early childhood education, and economic mobility. From the date of intake, our housing specialist works with families to find housing within close proximity of employment and their children's school to the greatest extent possible, preempting employment barriers before they occur and promoting stability for children in their academic development. The housing specialist strategically builds a diversified inventory of permanent housing units in the rental market throughout Tarrant County, suitable to the unique needs of individuals and families. Additionally, the housing specialist works collaboratively with property managers and landlords to resolve any disputes and leasing violations to prevent evictions to lessen the impact of returning to homelessness. Our case managers actively work to engage families in supportive services. Family engagement involves collaborating and empowering families to recognize their own needs and strengths, to take an active role in setting goals while building safe and trusting relationships. This approach to care promotes self-determination and includes families in the decision-making process that directly impacts their lives. Case managers assist families through intensive case management, service planning and monitoring, discharge and aftercare planning. Additionally, supportive services include funds available for childcare, transportation, food, therapy services, and linkages to internal and community resources such as employment services and access to mainstream benefits. We support long-term housing stability by assisting families to apply for income-based and tax credit properties. These services assist a family's ability to maintain housing and assist on preventing a return to homelessness, improving parent-child relationships, and overall health and well-being. The intensity of supportive services is driven by the family's choice and the complexity of needs identified through assessments. Trauma-informed care, housing first principles, and a dual generational approach are integral components of the practice environment. Implementation of trauma-informed care and culturally competent services focus on assisting families and children to develop protective factors aimed at mitigating risks associated with the impact of trauma and preventing returns to homelessness. I want to thank you for allowing me to share a little bit more about the services and supports provided by our team here at the Center for Transforming Lives. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Erin. And something that you said that I know is also a key part of both Demetria and Mark's area as well is the importance of client choice and client empowerment and efficacy, and helping them to understand that they do have control of their lives and helping to support them in a lot of different ways. So we'll get to move on to that. So Demetria said a minute ago in her comments, and she said, you know, that all of us on this call at least have a roof over our heads. And so I want to do a quick survey, and I want you to think about your colleagues, your network, your family members, and we're going to have a poll pop up. And I want to know, have you yourself or someone you know ever been evicted from their home, or have you or they ever been homeless for economic reasons? And I'll give it a few minutes to look at this poll and then we'll pop up. Okay. And there we go. Okay, I have to say, the yes category is bigger than I was expecting. I mean, 44% have known someone or they themselves have experienced homelessness. So thank you all very much for sharing that with us today. Now, before COVID-19, thinking about this issue, Texas had an eviction rate of 2.17%. And what that means is that every year, out of 100 renters, slightly over 2 are evicted. And at that time, this was resulting in over 206 evictions every single day in our state. Now, to put that in perspective, California, which is a place none of us would say has a low cost of living, has an eviction rate of less than 1%. And what that really shows is the difference in landlord-tenant protections, mediation services, and all sorts of things that Demetria and Aaron deal with regularly. Now, evictions result in homelessness, school changes and non-attendance, court records, bad credit, and job loss. They make it harder to find subsequent housing, and they result in a continued downward spiral to lower quality housing. Evictions impact the entire family, and evidence shows that they have a disproportionately harmful impact on families of color, with 1 in 5 Black women and 1 in 12 Latinas reporting having been evicted at least once as an adult, compared to 1 in 15 white women. Now, there's no true national tracking system for evictions. As we're going through COVID, we see that these numbers are going up. Evictions are tracked primarily at the county level. However, the eviction lab at Princeton is tracking 27 counties that have systems for tracking and reporting on evictions that are comparable, so they can look at all 27, together. And 3 of them are in Texas. So you have Travis County in Austin, you have Tarrant County, actually in Fort Worth, and then Harris down in Houston. So from March through the first week of December of last year, there were 725 evictions filed in Austin, okay? Compare that to 9,266 filed in Fort Worth and 18,229 filed in Houston. Now, Austin is smaller than Houston for sure, but it's actually bigger than Fort Worth. And so one of the factors that you're seeing is, again, a difference in the result of additional tenant protections that take place at the Austin and the Travis County level that do not exist in other areas. And of course, evictions don't count those people that leave their house and are forced to move as soon as they get a notice of forcing them to move. So they don't even get counted in this bigger number. And these are really just some of the reasons that Texas Women's Foundation wanted to focus on housing stability, and how us, with our grantees, are really wanting to prevent evictions before that damage is caused. So now we're all here together, and I want to move on to some questions. And this first one may kind of go to Demetria and Aaron, but Mark, if you've got some comments on the first one, please come on in as well. And what I'd love to know is, what are some of the barriers that your clients are facing when they try to move to a lower poverty, maybe historically off limits neighborhood? And how are you able to help them address those?
Erin, go right ahead. I see you've unmuted first.
No problem. So I think one of the things is, the affordability and really the second chance component plays a significant factor in second chance is not always second chance, depending on the level of need that the family is requesting when it comes to how many evictions or lease violations that they've had in the past that play a significant impact on their credit history, or the criminal background plays a significant. So not all second chance apartments are necessarily second chance, which I think plays a significant barrier for the families that are looking for housing opportunities within their financial ability to pay for that.
So, you know, HUD quite often states that the way to achieve what we need on a housing level is that we need public-private partnerships. And I'd say that's probably true. I say that is true. But at the same time, it's the public sector and the private sector who have both erected barriers for our families to make these kind of housing types of moves to lower poverty, non-segregated areas. As far as the public sectors are concerned, I'm talking about both, not even both, but all three levels of government, the local, the state, and the federal. And Dina, you kind of hit on some differences even within our state. So you have that make it either difficult for families. Policies, if you're talking about the federal level, we're thinking the way the voucher program is even made, right? The way the rules are made. There was a time before ICP filed this litigation regarding the fair market rents, which is how they set the maximum of the subsidy for the voucher holders. The way that was crafted and the formula that was crafted at HUD steered people to high poverty neighborhoods that were pretty much racially isolated. Since that litigation settled, we now have a better policy. That's the federal level. On the state level, the state certainly plays a big role in where low-income housing tax credit apartments go. And I say that because by federal law, they can't turn away voucher holders. The state plays a part in that, as well as the federal government plays a part in how that program runs. As far as localities, California is a great example of how they have certain provisions that kind of help low-income renters. But we can have inclusionary type of policies that could require in some of our more exclusionary suburban areas that they build low-income housing when they're building regular market rate housing, so that you have a mix of incomes within one complex, right? And so that's really not being done. And on the issue of zoning, you have some of our areas here in at least the Dallas area that zone out multifamily altogether. They don't even want to build apartments under the auspices and argument of density. And so there are multiple ways that the public sector erects barriers. As far as the private sector, the fact that the state of Texas is one of 2 states in the country that by state law are not ordinances that and something we along with some of our allies, Texas Tenants Union and Texas Housers, are trying to fight. But the private industry, even though somebody may perfectly qualify for an apartment, the minute they find out the person would be subsidized by a voucher, they'll say, no, we don't want to rent to them. And our 2020 study found that discrimination in the DFW area as far as voucher holding was concerned was huge. Actually, it got worse in the last 3 years from when we did our previous study. The banks do play a role in the tax credit program and how those are concentrated in neighborhoods of color versus being spread out all over. So everybody has had an opportunity, let's say, to play a role in the barriers that low-income families face. And it's got to be said that only 1 in 4 people who qualify to even get a voucher receive it, because there just hasn't been the funding for the amount of people who need these kind of vouchers. And those are the landlords who aren't suffering these days, because the voucher takes place of income that might be lost from somebody, because a voucher holder pays 30% of their income towards the rent, and the voucher takes care of the rest. So sorry to be long-winded.
Well, and that's an interesting statement. And I know that's something that you and Aaron work on a lot, is getting landlords to understand the actual value of a housing choice voucher and how that provides them with a baseline, it sounds like, of income that's kind of sort of guaranteed. So just real quick though, if I go apply today for a housing choice voucher, and both of you answer because I'm assuming it's different in each county, how long might I have to wait till I actually get my voucher? Erin, Demetria, what do you think?
It really depends. I mean, you have wait lists that are up to 5 years. You have sometimes where the wait list closes and then 2 years later, they're reinstating it and having you reapply for that application process to start. So you may have been on a list a couple of years ago and then they delete that list and start over. And then there's times where the funding isn't available. So you might get a voucher for 3 months versus at some of the vouchers offer like a 12-month, a monthly stipend. So it's really dependent on the availability of funds, but the wait list is really long.
And actually, Dina, that answer doesn't really vary, even state to state. 3 to 5 years is, I think, kind of the going average. Sometimes there are certain populations that are prioritized, like people who are unsheltered may be prioritized, but the 3 to 5 year window is pretty consistent around the country, I'd say.
Okay, thank you all very much. So Mark, like we said a minute ago, Harmony really shows that housing, rental assistance, mortgage assistance is important, but there's a lot else going on to help families achieve self-sufficiency, as well as economic mobility. So what are some of the strategies that you use at Harmony to kind of help stabilize families, both in housing as well as in other parts of their lives?
Right, Dina. So at Harmony, we focus on what we call pathways to self-sufficiency. And so we built that model based upon Annie Casey's Working Families model. It's more of like a one-stop shop for supportive and wraparound services. And also we read a book and built our model around when helping hurts. When we want to try to stabilize families and their households and then try to help them get to a level of self-sufficiency. And so our whole end game is around self-sufficiency and getting them to a point of livable wages and helping them to get to a point where they're achieving their goals and their dreams. And so we have 4 focus areas or 4 pillars for our self-sufficiency. And so first of all, it's our help focus, and our pillar help is really focused on basic needs, helping to stabilize and provide barrier removal services. And so that's like our food pantry, also our financial assistance, where we help with rent, mortgage, and utility assistance. Then also transportation issues, childcare, legal, as I mentioned earlier, or if they are able to find an apartment or they're able to find housing, we provide furniture to those families and just help stabilize them where they are and meet them with whatever needs that they may have. And then the next area of focus is around housing. And so how can we stabilize them and get them to a more permanent housing? And so Harmony, we partner a lot. So we work with other partners to get them into rapid rehousing, shelter, or getting them into a stabilized situation where they can look for other opportunities. We deal with a lot of families that are in these crisis situations. A lot of them, especially in our community, are in motels and they're living in those situations, and it's impacting their entire family because they're very transient and they're having to move around from place to place. And so we try to provide that case management and addressing kind of the holistic of that person and addressing all of their needs. And then the third area of focus is around health. And so with that, that is looking at physical, emotional, and mental health. And so we have a great team of licensed professional counselors. We have Dr. Brenda Richardson Rowe, who is our supervisor that oversees our counseling center. And as many of you know, that health is a social determinant that is also being impacted by housing, and a lot of our families are in a traumatic situation. We recently had a drive-through rental assistance event. And as families were driving in and we were helping them with all of their paperwork to submit, because a lot of them are do not have access to the computers or the internet. And so we had them to come in and drop off their paperwork, and we provided the case management. While we were doing that, our team of therapists and counselors were going through the lines and doing wellness checks. And we were able to help a lot of families with counseling sessions on the spot, or getting them scheduled to come in or do a virtual teletherapy session. And then also with our health, we have community health workers and nutritionists. So we're focused on the whole person. And then the fourth area of our pillars in helping families get to self-sufficiency is around hope. And that's our educational and economic mobility. And so we have a program that is the Career and Training Development Initiative, and we're helping individuals with career, helping them with life skills, financial assistance and empowerment and education, training them on savings, debt elimination, helping them to get banking. So it's a very holistic approach, and all of it is comprehensive, where we bring all of our services to assist them. One of my best stories I love to tell, and I'll end with this, is a single mom. She was staying in a motel, working in North Dallas at a mall, and not making a lot of money, and her hours got dropped. And so she came to Harmony, and we were able to help her to stabilize where she was and help her get out of the motel. We actually hired her on our staff at Harmony to increase her wages, get her more money for her son and her family. So she was a single mom, did not have the transportation, so she was taking DART everywhere. Then we got her into our career and training development program, where we taught her resume writing, interviewing skills, got her prepared, and she graduated from our program, and we helped her find a job at Chime Solutions at Redbird Mall. So she's working there doing the customer service job, and then a donor came out of nowhere and said, we would like to donate a car to a single mom. We're like, we got the perfect person for you. But we ran into a problem. She did not know how to drive. And so our program director, Candy Bradshaw, took her out every week, taught her how to drive, and she went to the DMV. She failed the first time, but she did not give up. She kept going, and she went back and she passed it the second time around. And so she is an example of how we look at providing the supportive and wraparound services to help those individuals to get from the housing instability and get them to a level of self-sufficiency, so that they're living and thriving and achieving their dreams.
Thank you, Mark. You know, one of the things that you talked about was furniture and furnishings and things that families need. And something, I guess I first really read about eviction, it's been 3 or 4 years ago, and I read Dr. Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted. And if you have not read that, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a super accessible book, Evicted, and his name is Matthew Desmond. But I guess I never realized, I mean, how many people that are evicted lose virtually everything. So, I mean, can you just imagine every time you move, you start over. You don't have a bed, you don't have a sofa, you don't have towels. And so because of the trauma of that experience, that, I mean, when you think about your children not having a bed to sleep on because they had to move it out to the front yard, and you didn't have a truck to move it. So I think that those wraparound services, and it's just things we don't always think about. So the next question is kind of for all of y'all, and then I have a special thing to add into it. So housing's been a problem. I mean, Matthew Desmond's book came out like 4 years ago. This is not a new problem, but COVID-19 certainly has changed the landscape some, and has changed. That's why Mark's doing drive-through rental assistance and not seeing people in his office. So when you've been assisting families impacted by COVID-19, the pandemic and the economic downturn, what are some of the observations lessons learned and best practices. I mean, I know from talking to Demetria that it's even been the issues of the HUD offices being closed. So how do you navigate some of these issues if you can't get into where the people have been meeting in the past? Are there any community linkages that have been really beneficial? And then as a part of this, it's a kind of an aside, think about formerly incarcerated individuals that you work with. What kind of a special case is that? And we actually had a question come through the Q&A about working with formerly incarcerated. So if you have any experience in that, let's kind of wrap that into that question too. And let's start with Erin this time.
Well, speaking from CTL, as far as the impact COVID has had on our families, it's been really challenging in the fact that we're not able to do home visits right now. Really being able to support those families. I mean, we're doing the best that we can with the phone calls. We are doing monthly check-ins with all of our families in the home, not going into the home, but going to their apartments just to see how they're doing, because being present and offering those supportive services are so important. We've seen an increase in depression and anxiety and just that isolation of being in that apartment with their kids with that virtual learning. As far as the community linkages, in the very beginning when COVID first hit, the school system had a significant positive impact in providing meals daily to the families. And it was so important at the time because a lot of our families do not have transportation, and the schools that their kids are going to were in walking distance of their apartments. So they were able to go and pick up food daily. It also helped with the mobile pantry, the mobile food pantry that was coming around to the different communities to help support those families when the bus system wasn't running and there was nowhere for them to go. Additionally, we provided activity packs in the very beginning for all those kids who you had this abrupt stop to going into school. And what do you do? How do you support those families with engaging their children in academic activities? So we've done our best in supporting our families, and we continue to support them and doing check-ins. We go to their apartments every month to check in to see how we could see what we can do to support them, as on top of the phone calls. I mean, we always reach out to them weekly, as well as just checking in once a month, because it's so important to be present with them during this time.
Demetria, maybe?
Sure. Well, before our counselors actually informed Dallas Housing Authority voucher holders about our services in person. We averaged educating them about their fair housing rights and things in person about maybe 4,000 a year. And obviously the Dallas Housing Authority is not doing those big briefings, as they call them, anymore. So we've tried to figure out an online system where we created a video so they can hear about our services and sign up that way. And then we make sure that the Housing Authority gives folks our phone numbers so we can talk to them directly. So that's like one of the types of things we had to do to make sure people don't fall through the cracks and realize what their fair housing rights are and that they have the opportunity to move throughout our 7-county area. We do post-move services, and we try to connect our families through post-move assistance. And so that's been by phone. It's easy for us to hop on Zoom, but everybody's not tech savvy and everybody doesn't have the internet bandwidth for Zoom. So we do use like the free conference phone line to connect our families who are interested in having those post-move kind of monthly talks with our counselors, just kind of to talk about how things are going in their communities. Because like I said, we're a 7-county area where families can move. So our families don't necessarily live all in one area anyway. So this way of connecting and sharing resources even among themselves and experiences among themselves as they've moved out to some of the outer low poverty areas, that phone conversation has been valuable for us. As it relates to people with previous backgrounds and previous records, I think from ICP as a civil rights advocate, always likes to remind the community at large about the impact of looking at someone's background and making sure that they look very specifically and they just don't have this broad-based policy, right? So if I wrote a hot check 20 years ago and that's on my record, you know, how is that going to affect the safety of anybody today as I'm trying to get an apartment? And so, for instance, we submitted comments to the state on a state program where they were having some kind of like very broad-based prohibition against people who had any kind of record. And clearly when Black people have been arrested, they are arrested more frequently than others, but they're not necessarily convicted. And so there was a rule that was passed during the Obama administration about just that, making sure you don't have just these broad-based policies and that you're very specific. Is this thing that the person has done something that's going to harm or be dangerous for folks? So we do try to make sure we do that. As individuals that we counsel, if they do have something that's old like that, usually a housing authority screens out folks who have major issues like that, but to the extent they may have something old or something, our counselors negotiate and talk to the landlords and talk that thing through, because sometimes landlords like to hear from an additional party to that conversation. So that's some of the stuff that we've done. Your questions, you had several.
Yeah, I think that was pretty full. Any new lessons, Mark, that you've learned or?
Yes, Dina. So collaboration is key. You cannot do this by yourself in addressing all of the challenges that we have in our community and trying to help our families to remain housing secure. And so we got to work together. And that has been a huge lesson for us during this COVID-19 season. And so we formed or joined in collaborative works with the Dallas Rental Assistant Collaborative, where we're working with several nonprofits, organizations, the faith-based community, working with the city of Dallas and Dallas County to address a lot of the rental assistance and eviction issues that we have in our community. And so we work with the United Way on this initiative and trying to address these needs. Also, as we are helping these families, what a great surprise is that the landlords really want to partner with us in these apartment complexes, and they want to help make sure that they're housing secure, and financial institutions are reaching out to us as well for those who are challenged with mortgages. And so we contact the landlords and we let them know about their tenant that is dealing with issues and trying to pay for their rent. And a lot of our clients that are coming to us do not have access to the technology, as I mentioned before. And so the landlords are helping the tenants to apply and submit the applications to receive rental assistance. So that's a great partnership and a collaborative work, and we're looking to try to do more of that. And like I said, in regards to the technology and that access, that's real critical. And so we have a ground game of trying to reach more people in our community and getting the word out. And that's why we were holding the drive-through rental assistance. Also, we're partnering with some churches in the Redbird area to address the huge need of evictions in our community. Just in Redbird alone, we heard a report from the Child Poverty Action Lab that there are over 700 evictions just between January and July. And Redbird had the highest with 700 evictions. And so we're working with Concord, OCBF, Friendship West, Antioch, several other churches in our community, and some nonprofits to just address the evictions in our community. And so we're working on our ground game of trying to get the word out in our community. Just around the issue around reentry. So Harmony, we are also involved with our criminal justice outreach. We have a program that's focused on going into the prisons, but because of COVID, we're not able to go in and offer our programs. So we're at each level. We're at the federal, state, and also in the juvenile detention centers. So we work with the families that have family members that are incarcerated. But if we have any returning citizens that are coming back to our community, we're there to help them with our self-sufficiency pathways, where we're providing help with the basic needs and the stabilization, helping make sure that they have the housing that is required for them, and addressing some of the mental health and wellness, not just for them, but also for the whole family. Because as you know, when they come back home, there's a family dynamic that maybe the wife or the significant other, they were leading the household, and now they're coming back home and they want to take their rightful place, but it's causing that tension. And so we're working with the whole family and the children as well. And then also with the education and job training. So we're getting them into our programs, or we're partnering with some of our other agency to get them into certifications. So it's a holistic approach and a targeted approach around our friends that are returning back home to our community. So we are providing those resources to those individuals.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. You know, we all are feeling isolated during COVID-19, but I think Demetria and Aaron, when you think about the families that you work with that have made what really is a brave decision in some ways. I mean, they may have recently stepped out of and away from family, friends, neighborhood to move to a new area, either for better schools or for lower crime. Sorry, my cat's joining me now. And so I thought I could get her. But, you know, having to work with them on that isolation is really, really important. And so Demetria, real quick though, excuse me for just a moment. Sorry, everybody. You said 7-county area. What are the 7 counties that work, I guess, with Dallas HUD, and how did that get defined, that it's not just Dallas County?
Sure. And actually, so HUD provides the subsidy, and that funnels down to the local housing authority. So it's the Dallas Housing Authority we're talking about. So back in the mid 80s, there was an old lawsuit called the Walker case, which was really a public housing segregation and discrimination lawsuit, where HUD was a defendant, City of Dallas was a defendant, and the Housing Authority was a defendant. And so out of that history came the ability for someone who has a Dallas housing voucher, Dallas Housing Authority voucher, because there are all kinds of housing authorities. There's Dallas County, there's Plano, there's McKinney, there's Garland, there's Mesquite, but specifically Dallas Housing Authority, City of Dallas Housing Authority voucher can be used in Dallas County and in every county that touches Dallas County. Because again, as I started, you know, housing is a regional issue. And so if you can find someone to be forced to live within a particular jurisdiction or area, even though you're in a bigger housing market, then really you're steering them. And so there's this concept, it's called portability. And so in Dallas, you don't have to go through the extra administrative hoop to quote unquote port your voucher to another jurisdiction. You simply can use it with any of those jurisdictions. And there is an agreement, believe it or not, when I talk about the concentration of vouchers in Southern Dallas, a lot of the suburban housing authorities actually have a lot of their own families living in Southern City of Dallas as well. And so there's that agreement that was struck years ago before my time between these jurisdictions, between Dallas and these other jurisdictions, that these vouchers could be used interchangeably like that in these various locations.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we've gone through some of our Q&As from the audience, and we've got about 3 minutes. So I have one last question, and so you've got a minute apiece. This is a wish. Look into the future. Maybe something is possible now due to COVID, or that you're hoping is possible. So what is a policy or an action or a program that you would like to see take place in Dallas, North Texas, or in Texas around housing stability? You've got 1 minute, and we're going to start with Demetria this time, go to Mark, and then Aaron, you'll close us out.
1 minute, but not one item, right?
That's 1 minute.
Okay. As it relates to vouchers, it would be great if the bills that are pending right now at the state legislature were passed such that the state no longer preempted localities from determining their own fate as it relates to whether or not they want to pass an ordinance to stop voucher discrimination. And it would be great to see more of our municipalities want to pass ordinances to stop voucher discrimination, because we have cities in DFW, whole cities where nobody can use a voucher because none of the landlords take vouchers, right? So that's huge on our radar, and particularly since the legislative session just started. But also, if some of our cities would roll back some of their exclusionary practices, particularly zoning, so that it won't be so difficult to build apartments and to build mixed income apartments, to be more specific. Would love for more people to be able to get vouchers because, like I said, only who economically qualify for them get them, and would love to see more policies that incentivize low-income housing development. Even in the city of Dallas, we helped the city of Dallas, we pushed to get some policies passed, and right now they're trying to repeal and roll those back even though they haven't actually been used yet to any full extent. So I think that's my time.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mark, 1 minute.
Sure, just real quickly, as we help families during this COVID-19, of course, we want to continue with that effort and getting the support to help meet those immediate needs of those individuals and preventing them to become housing insecure. But what we realized during this time is that a lot of our families are suffering or not having the emergency savings to help them to make it through this crisis. And so we want to help with building up their resiliency so that they can bounce back through these type of crises. So it's going to take the preparation to help them build up that type of financial stability and also having the financial assistance. And so that's why we're excited to partner with the Texas Women's Foundation, that we are starting our financial empowerment program that's going to help us with doing the immediate crisis, helping with the housing, but also looking towards the future and building out their financial resiliency and also helping them to get to a level of financial empowerment and wealth building. So give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. But our ultimate goal is teach them how to own the pond.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Erin, what's your wish?
I would say building the relationship between the families and educators to add that layer of support and advocacy for the kids, just starting younger and helping develop that. As well as the discrimination against families as it relates to the vouchers and the criminal history, and being able to provide for those families to be able to provide for their families. You can't do it unless you have that stability with housing. There are so many different components that are related to housing stability and education and getting the better job. Just putting those all together and working as a community together to ensure that those kids, you know, have a really stable foundation to begin with.
Thank you, Erin. Yeah, that's why we call housing the anchor of the family. This has been incredibly helpful to me, and I think it's probably been incredibly helpful to our audience as well. But before we go, I have to share my boss, the Texas Women's Foundation CEO and President, Rosalind Dawson Thompson, is joining us to say hello and also to say goodbye. Hi, Rosalind.
I have the hello and the goodbye. No. Oh, listen, this was absolutely spectacular. Demetria, Mark, Erin, thank you so much for the work you do every day, the wisdom you impart. And Dina, my beloved colleague, thank you for just being brilliant and pulling this together. We're really grateful to everybody who joined us today, and the 122 of you that I saw on the call. Bless you for being part of this. We want to encourage you to not only hear what you heard, but to do something about it. And doing something about it, there's a lot of action steps that were discussed today. We, of course, have one that you could help us with our Housing Stability Fund. And we would be delighted to have your support to help continue our partnerships with organizations and extraordinary humans like the ones you met today. So finally, I'd like to invite you to our next virtual Viewpoints, which is about our advocacy platform. And again, some of the threads from today will pull into that conversation relative to our legislative agenda and how we hope to mobilize an army of advocates. Right now, there are about 2,000 of you around the state. And if you would like to go get mobilized, then I invite you to go to txwf.org and sign up, because we are ready to rock this 87th legislative session. It's about time. So my friends, thank you so much for joining us. We will adjourn now, and God bless you all. Thank you.